Hey, brothers and sisters. Sometimes when we're observing Bible prophecy, especially in the day that we're living in, we can get so much information flooding in that we forget the important details and to look back and connect the dots. So I wanted to read a portion of Damon Duck's article from RaptureReady.com that kind of helps us reconnect the dots from the things that we've already seen just this past couple months and how it's leading up to more fulfillment of Bible prophecy. So in this article, he says, concerning the Battle of Gog and Magog, on June 1st, 2022, Israeli Prime Minister Bennett announced that Israel plans to deploy its new Iron Beam laser defense system next year. Israel will be able to shoot down a drone, mortar, rocket, and anti-tank missiles. Bennett called it a global game changer. God said, "No weapon that is formed against thee, Israel, will prosper." Isaiah 54, verse 17. The bombs, rockets, and missiles of Iran and her allies will damage Israel, but they will not succeed in destroying Israel. Concerning the Battle of Gog and Magog, following Israel's criticism of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russia started calling the Golan Heights occupied Syrian territory. On June 6, 2022, Israeli Defense Forces fired missiles at targets near Damascus. Hours later, Russia and Syria responded by flying joint air patrols near the Golan Heights along Syria's border with Israel. Russia and Syrian jets and bombers flying near the Golan Heights along Israel's border is a major escalation of the conflict between Israel and Syria. Concerning the Battle of Magog and Gog, the Israeli military has spent about a month training for an attack on Iran and for a counterattack by Iran and her allies. In addition to the month of intensive training, on June 8th, it was reported that Israel has developed the ability for its fighter jets to reach Iran without having to be refueled in the air. Israel has developed a 1-ton bomb that can be carried inside the F-35s and not impact their stealth character. One prophecy teacher recently said Israel has informed several nations, including the U.S., that the Israeli government now believes that it has a military plan that will succeed. The big question is whether Israel will attack Iran and when. It is possible that only God knows. Now, just a reminder, Israel attacking Iran is not the Battle of Gog and Magog, but Iran has threatened to retaliate, and a retaliation that included Russia, Turkey, and the other prophesied allies would be the Battle of Gog and Magog. Israel attacking Iran could also trigger the destruction of Damascus, Isaiah 17, and perhaps a war with Israel's neighbors, Psalm 83. Now, the fulfillment of these prophecies would be a clear indication that the latter years and latter days have arrived, the very end of our age. Concerning the Battle of Gog and Magog on June 10th, Syria reported that Israeli rockets struck several targets near Damascus, and there was significant damage to civilian and military runways at the Damascus International Airport. All flights incoming and outgoing were suspended until the runways can be repaired. Russia condemned the provocative airstrikes on Syrian territory, calling them absolutely unacceptable, and demanded that Israel stop this vicious practice. Israel won't stop because Iran has been flying weapons and supplies, specifically missiles and GPS systems, to that airport for use by Iranian forces and allies against Israel. On June 12, 2022, it was reported that sources in the U.S. State Department have confirmed that the Biden administration intends to open an Office of Palestinian Affairs in Jerusalem without Israeli permission. Biden intends for this office to carry out the duties of an embassy without being under the U.S. Embassy. Now, according to the article, Biden's actions are in a violation of international law. According to the U.S. ambassador to Israel under Trump, Biden is setting the stage for an attempt to give the Palestinians control over part of Jerusalem and to implement the two-state solution without Israel's permission. Now, if this is true, God said he would send the battle of Armageddon upon the world for dividing the land of Israel, Joel 3 verse 2, and God's judgment will fall upon the U.S. for what Biden is doing, Zechariah 12 verse 3. Concerning hyperinflation and economic collapse, the rider on the black horse of Revelation 6, a reader recently sent an article dated June 7th that contains the opinions of several people on our current economic situation. So far, it is reported that spending and debt are out of control, hyperinflation is guaranteed, and there is no way to fix it. Our government can't do it, but if it could sell everything our government and every U.S. citizen owns, the U.S. would still be broke and unable to pay off all of its debt. The Great Reset is a controlled demolition of the global economic system and is a replacement with a new system where the elites are masters of the slaves. Edward Dowd, the former BlackRock manager, said in regards to this, more lockdowns are coming to control the expected violence that will result from an economic collapse. So, what is the end game? It is my opinion that Bible prophecy says this is leading to the tribulation period, a world government, a digital world currency, the tracking of all buying and selling, and it won't end until the second coming of Jesus.